I will record it again. So this reminded me. So our webinars are recorded, so you can play them later on, and you can go back and review whatever you missed. For example, this webinar is part of a series of 5. This is the third of the in the HR series. So you can go back and look at the webinars that you missed if you did miss any. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have a great group of sponsors and community partners in Minnesota SCORE, and we're very proud of them. They do a lot of work with us in terms of educating our mentors, supporting our clients when needed. For example, they did the bank organizations did a lot to support our clients during COVID, coming in and educating everyone on how to get loans and grants, and that process that was a bit complicated at the beginning. So it's great that we have these partners that can work with us. So at this point, what I want to do is turn things over to Jeff Miller, who is our feature presenter today, and we take you through the topics. Jeff? Jeff, would you unmute? Are you there? Oh, there you are.
I am here. I apologize. I just had to relocate. Landscapers showed up, so I didn't want you hearing a whole bunch of buzzing and things like that. So today we're going to talk about performance reviews to retain and motivate employees. So performance reviews are perhaps overlooked tool in your overall toolbox for retention and motivation. It's something that we're going to go into how to really elevate these to make them much more than just a required task. So performance reviews, we know when they're done right, they can be a way to leverage talent, understand your talent base, really understand their needs and opportunities, gather intelligence and feedback. We're going to go into that a lot today to really make these a two-way dialogue, and then make stronger connections with employees. So as Raman mentioned, throughout, use the Q&A, raise your hands. We want this to be interactive, and we'll have time to pause for questions along the way. So traditional performance reviews, well, they're not great. This top-down approach kind of monologue that happens, and you know, they can lead to some bad results here. You can see some of the numbers on the page here that traditional performance reviews, only 14% of employees think that their performance reviews actually inspire them. A third of the time, the traditional approach actually makes people walk away and their performance gets worse. And the repercussions are when employees don't want to hang around, turnover, when they're not motivated, when we're not using this as a tool to retain. This is one estimate of a replacement cost. We know turnover, it varies by company and business, but it's expensive, hiring, onboarding, etc. And over on the bottom right there, again, varies by business, but how much money is lost due to poor customer experience, due to unmotivated employees. So it's important to really use all of the tools and resources that you have to motivate and retain employees, and performance reviews is one of those in your toolbox. So when done right, what can happen when you change your mindset about performance reviews and really make them more about a dialogue, more about gathering feedback, more about inspiring and motivating? The numbers can change. We can go from red numbers to green numbers. 83% of people in a survey said that when they actually get recognition for what they do, it's actually more fulfilling than rewards or gifts. And praise from managers is extremely motivating. 63% of people who get this regular recognition, and regular, we're going to go back to that concept throughout, regular recognition, aren't going to seek employment elsewhere. That's great. So a couple other stats here. When they're highly engaged and receive regular feedback, their performance, 2 times higher and more likely to stay in their current company for the next year. So that's great. And then bottom line, for these companies that have that highly engaged workforce that can be facilitated through good regular feedback, performance reviews, and check-ins, they see a 19.2% growth in annual operating income. So there's a bottom line impact to doing this right. All right, so as we go along, let's just start with some of the basics. Performance review cadence. We're getting back to that idea of regular. So annual reviews are probably what a lot of us are familiar with, particularly from the past, and maybe even a little bit right now. Annual performance reviews are kind of a standard. The challenge is a lot of companies are looking to move away from those for good reasons. It's packing a lot into potentially an hour-long meeting. Well, let's talk about your performance. Let's talk about the wins. Let's talk about improvements. Let's talk about promotions. Let's talk about compensation, all jammed into 1 hour. It doesn't really work. Even mid-performance reviews might not be enough. So more companies, and it's really more of a recommendation to move to these idea of quarterly performance reviews, or monthly even, or one-on-one. Quarterly, it really allows for you to be able to split up some topics. You can have a designated topic. You can obviously talk about performance, but maybe you can focus more on development and goals. Maybe one of these can be designated just for compensation. But it's that more immediate opportunity, more touch points for support, motivation, and recognition. Over on the right-hand side here, with our one-on-one or monthly performance, again, even more touch points, more immediate, more ongoing recognition. And at the bottom here is something, this link goes out to something called the GOOD framework. Any of the links in the deck here, I checked last night. If you have any problems, just send us a note. But they were all live as of last night. But the GOOD framework stands for goals, opportunities, obstacles, and decisions. And when you think about that, let's break it down into goals and opportunities. This is a great framework to have because goals and opportunities are really that future forward-looking idea. So you're talking to somebody about their future with your company. That's great. Obstacles and decisions are what's happening with them today and how you can support them. Anytime you can tell an employee that you're there to support them, this is a great discussion. You've got the balance of the future. What are we doing going forward with your goals and the opportunities? You have a place here, and how can I help you out that way? So the idea is to have more of these touch points, more chances for regular feedback and regular recognition, couple things that are important here before we leave this page. This is what employees want. I'm going to look down at my notes here so I don't misquote a stat here. There's a resource called HR, like Human Resources Dive. There's a whole series of dives. There's marketing dive, there's operations dive, etc. But they did a study and they said that 92% of respondents say they favor being reviewed more than once a year, and 72% prefer monthly. Now, I know that's a lot to ask. You've got enough going on with your business, but really it's about those red numbers and those green numbers. Any time you spend as a business owner, right, that any of us spend as business owners, we have to figure out the return on our time invested. And when you look at those red numbers, and only 14% say they motivate, 1/3 leads to lower performance, versus some of those green numbers, it really, the things we go through today, doing performance review right, really can help you get to a good return on your time invested. The other thing that was interesting was that Gallup, the analytics and advisory company, had a stat that said that 50% of employees, only 50% of employees, strongly agree they know what's expected of them at work. Well, I'm not exactly a math whiz, but if 50% say they strongly agree, well, that means that 50% probably really don't know what's expected of work. So these type of quarterly performance reviews really give you more of those opportunities. Now, you're going to cover this in hiring and training and onboarding, but this really helps you course adjust, micro adjustments along the way, so that you don't all of a sudden have someone going down a path of what's expected of them and them having one expectation and you having another. That can lead to some challenges during these conversations, but larger challenges. So let's stop for a second. Let's see, I don't know if we want to talk a little bit about, before we get into some of the approach of the rest of today, where we talk about the specific activities during performance review, do we want to pause and see if there are any questions?
Jeff, we have one in the Q&A box if you want to pull that up.
All right. So the question is, and I apologize for getting a little noisy here, how do we do performance reviews as a company without employees using it as an opportunity to dish on other employees? Nice, I like it. Using it as an outlet for negative emotions they haven't let out where problems arose. Okay, yeah, so one of the things, and we're going to get into this a little bit, is one of the best recommendations for a before is 360 feedback or peer reviews. Now, all that's also going to potentially give opportunities for people to dish on other employees. This is a challenging question. The negative emotions, I think the opportunity to have those outside of performance reviews, you know, have them come in and talk to you and address it immediately. The more that you give that opportunity to do it elsewhere instead of performance review, I think is going to be helpful. It is a challenge in businesses where someone wants to complain. It happens. The more you can do to provide kind of an ongoing feedback mechanism and address those immediately, I think it will help eliminate those coming for they get pent up and a performance review gets sidetracked. I mean, the performance review should really, and we're going to get into this with some of the before activities, setting the expectations about what the discussion will be about. It's really going to be about that employee and the focus purely on that employee and not larger what's going on with this person or the other. But it's a great question. It is a concern. We had another question in here. How do you track these KPIs? So the KPIs that we're talking about, Brad, I might need a little bit more detail here in terms of KPIs, what we're looking for here on performance reviews. I think we might get into it a little bit, and we can circle back on this. We might get into it a little bit when we talk about evaluation forms or templates and setting clear expectations. So let's hold that one and come back to it. And then we had a couple that were answered here. All right, I think we're good there. Okay.
So Brad has clarified that what software does a good job of tracking employees?
A good question, and I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, I don't know if you know of some of the software tools that are best out there to be used.
You know, when I worked for larger companies, we had all kinds of systems. So I really didn't get involved in systems. A lot of them were developed on top of other COTS, if you will. But so I don't have specific expertise on that. But I would say as a manager, you know, you really wanna you wanna have your KPIs at your level, and then you want to see how it applies to that employee specifically. One of the pitfalls is that, you know, you got to hold people accountable for what they control rather than the broader company KPI. So while I don't have an answer to that, I'm a huge fan of specifically discussing that employee's performance and their KPIs and what they can impact.
Great, thank you. There's one more, and then I think we'll get going. What are your thoughts on tilting annual review instead of performance review to unnecessary pressure? It's a great point. And I think that, you know, words matter. Performance review very much can feel like a top-down monologue. One of the ideas is really, and I've seen in organizations, is any of these being called a check-in, an annual review. I think you'll see what's right in your organization, but the more you remove, I mean, these conversations are going to be about performance. They're going to be about growth and development and feedback. So yes, just having performance right in there automatically elevates and kind of creates a little bit of unnecessary anxiety. And we're going to talk a little bit, but I love the idea of changing words so that it's either check-in or annual, something along those lines. All right, great. So I'm going to move ahead here. Great questions. Keep them coming. And certainly as you can raise your hand to ask a live question. You can use the Q&A box, that's great, but you can also raise your hand. One of the things that I'm going to ask you to do here, whoops, I'm going to tell you our approach first, then I'm going to ask you something. So the approach for the rest of today is that it is a little bit more of a time investment, but like we said, we're trying to move those red numbers to the green numbers. So we're going to talk about things that you can do before the reviews, before the check-ins to set yourself up for success. The things you're doing during, a number of them you're probably already doing, but there'll be some other ideas or ways to make them better to ensure you have a meaningful and worthwhile exchange. And then after, really a commitment to show that you want to move forward with what you discussed. These three steps are important. Again, it's back to that return on time invested. This is time well invested to motivate and retain employees. So what I'm going to ask you to do throughout here is, whoops, in the chat, share some of your best examples you've experienced in performance reviews, whether as a recipient or a manager. I think one of the great things about these webinars is, yes, there's things up on the screen right now, but the opportunity, we got 33 participants here, the opportunity to learn from one another is one of the great things about this. So I really encourage you, we're going to come back to the chat and look at some of these. And, you know, some of them might slot into the before, during, or after. You don't have to worry about that. We'll just love to hear your best practices. I'll get you started. One of them's on my my before page here. My most recent manager, she would send out my review 24 hours in advance. And that was great. I could actually absorb it. I could react to it. I could then prepare my questions. I could see where we were on the same page and where there was maybe a gap. And so it was great that I wasn't reacting in the moment during that hour trying to absorb all this information. I could do it the day before. So in the chat, put in some thoughts, and we'll get to those in a couple pages here. So before, during, and after, let's talk a little bit about before the performance review. So no surprises. If someone's doing great, they should be hearing it as soon as they're doing great. If someone's not doing great, it needs to be taken care of right away. We shouldn't be holding information till performance review. But beyond that, there are a number of other steps on the page here that eliminate surprises. When you have surprises, you're not getting the best out of you. You're not getting the best out of the person you're trying to talk with. So clear expectations, including how someone's going to be evaluated. Now, this will be covered in hiring and onboarding, but it's always good before the actual check-in or review to remind people, what are the expectations? How will you be evaluated? That type of thing. So, and share with them. Another way to avoid surprises happen when your expectations are different or your assessments are different. And SMART goals are something that's been around for a while. You can see SMART is on the side here: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Later in the deck, there's a link to an article from Indeed that has more detail on how to build SMART goals. But SMART goals really help because they take things from being very subjective to be very, very concrete. I know what I'm going to do. I know how we're going to measure it. I know what time I have to do it in. So you're eliminating the surprises. Couple other ideas that have been very successful: employee self-review. This gets them in the mindset of talking. So your conversation, the during part of performance review, is going to be helpful. It also gives you a very good early read on where there might be those gaps in expectations or assessments. It allows you to actually guide how you want the performance review, the topics you know you need to cover. But what it does immediately is it automatically turns this into a two-way dialogue. It makes sure the employee knows you want to hear what they have to say. Their input is important. And, you know, aligning this with those evaluation forms you sent out is important, or, you know, the same, you'll be using the same yardstick as measurement. 360 and peer feedback is helpful. Throughout any review, you want to have as many facts as possible. And I really do think facts are important. Concrete examples, feelings. I feel like you did this. I feel like you did that. Well, the person across from the table can feel a different way. When you have concrete examples, some will be given from their self-review. Some will be given from peer feedback or 360, as well as your own review. That's going to generate a much better conversation. Someone's going to see, okay, I see what you mean when this happened. It was an event, it was an activity, it was whatever. So those concrete examples and developing those up front. So last couple steps here in terms of the before, the preparing. Like I said, one of the best practices I thought was the sending it out prior to the meeting. Really helps somebody get in the right mindset, allows them to absorb the information as much as possible, and also allows them to, you know, have their initial reaction. Sometimes performance reviews, sometimes you want to have those in private. It's, you know, particularly where there might be improvement areas. Somebody needs to be able to absorb that in private instead of it being launched on them during this meeting, during a performance review. It's challenging. It gives them a chance to absorb, think about their responses, and then it will lead to a better conversation. Last but not least here is the organize your documents. So this is important. Getting together what you need. So you're going to have your evaluation, employee evaluation, peer feedback, maybe the last quarters or last years, any of that stuff, so that you don't have to go hunting on your computer or in files. You want to make sure that you're organized and that your focus is on the person across from you during the review. So let's stop here for a second here before we get into some of the during activity. Let's talk a little bit about, let's see, we got a Q&A here. Excellent. Check in monthly with the team individually and progress meetings. Excellent. I love that. This is some of this great feedback we get from each other. I think it's a wonderful, again, words matter, and the idea of a progress meeting, really enjoy. I like that a lot. That's excellent. What else do we have here? We answered here. We answered that one. All right, great. Excellent. Anything else? Any hand raisers out there want to go live? That's all right. We're good here and we're doing well on time here. So let me just, again, check my notes. I write down these things and sometimes forget to say these great, smart thoughts. All right, I think we're good. So let's move into the during the performance review. Now, this is the part that I think a number of us are most familiar with, and certainly, type in your questions or raise your hand to ask a question. I think this is the part that a lot of us focus on. All right, we're actually in the meeting. What happens? So a couple things to make this most worthwhile. First is that dedicated focus. Let that person across from you know that you're present. They are your only focus for this next 45 minutes, hour and a half, whatever it may be. To help facilitate that, having a location that's comfortable. You're going to be talking about things that are going to be very personal and specific to them. You want it to be in a place where they can react the way they want to. I don't know how I did this, but through my career, I've always found myself in offices that have these big glass conference rooms. So everybody can see what you're doing and whatever. And those were just always the worst places to have a review because people were coming and going. There was lots of distractions. So the more you can pick a location, I know a lot of people like to potentially celebrate, go out, let's go out to a restaurant. If that works for you, that's great. If it's quiet enough, if you're not worried about some of the distractions of, can I refill your drink? What are you going to eat? So really putting some thought into the location that allows that one-on-one time, dedicated time, making sure that you're allocating the right amount of time aligned with your agenda, which will go. And last but not least, turning off technology. I know it's a challenge, but nothing's worse and nothing tells somebody that they're not the focal point when notifications are going off, when emails are coming in, when there's dings and buzzes and everything else going on. So the other thing is during a performance review, we talked about turning this into a two-way conversation. Again, some of these you're already doing, which is great. We talked about those traditional performance reviews that are top-down. We don't want that. And to facilitate that, the idea of an agenda, I've laid out one here. Make it work for you. These are some ideas. And certainly talk to your SCORE mentor also. And if they have the answers, great. But one of the great things about the Minnesota SCORE chapter is if I as your SCORE mentor don't have the answer, I've got 80 or 90 friends I can phone who can help out. We can get a co-mentor in who has expertise in a specific area. So this clear agenda, again, this can be part of the before activity. This is what we're going to cover. This is what we're going to happen during the meeting and the expectations. You're going to lead the conversation. You as the manager are going to be leading. You're going to be flexible though. But one of the good ideas to really reinforce this idea of a conversation is have the employee do a brief walkthrough of their self-review. Get the employee to talk first. What this does for you is it helps you in a couple different ways. The first thing it does is it might break a bad habit that some of us, or maybe all of us, might have. A performance review. I gotta do performance reviews. Okay, this is what I want to go through. Let me go through my checklist. By letting the employee start first, it puts you in listening mode from the start. It makes you sit back and say, okay, I've read their review. I know what they're going to say, but where do they focus? What are the things that they are animated about? What are the things that they are concerned about? Where did they go first? What things didn't they hit? This is going to help you, because if you, one, you're in listening mode, and two, paying attention to where they focus, this allows you to adjust your comments on the flow of the meeting as needed to really address the needs of the employee. So I think that's a really important first step. Again, you're leading this. So the second part of the agenda could be this idea of, all right, this is your time. I heard you. Let me tell you a little bit about what I'm thinking. Organize feedback in concrete examples. So that prior work that we talked about, the employer review, the 360 review, you actually having the concrete examples, not feelings, but actual examples, is going to be helpful. And this is an important part to get your points across, be clear. And if there are tough issues, address them head on, but have those concrete examples to really illustrate. All of us work well with stories. That's how people learn and remember things. So feeling like they're not doing enough for customer service isn't going to get them where they need to be. Showing them an example and what they could have done differently, that's where it is. So those concrete examples is important. Employee feedback and questions. This is a great opportunity, particularly if it's on a more regular basis, to really understand a little bit about, okay, so we talked about, they started talking about how they perform, but now I want to turn the conversation and more feedback from you, more questions. There are some examples here. You can build your own. The idea, though, is trying to understand what's going on in their day. This first one here is something that I've seen in customer experience. So we can borrow that from customer experience and go to employee experience. So there's a healthcare company I was working with that asked their customers on their surveys, what's the one thing we can do better? And it was really kind of cool to see some of those answers. And you'd expect to see, it was a healthcare company, you can be less expensive, you can be, you'd expect to see some of those. But if you spend the time with the results, you'll get to some really good stuff in there. The second thing is so we just changed some things. We changed the vacation policy. We changed the way we assign shifts. What do you think about it? Instead of waiting for this to become a problem down the road or hearing it in side conversations along the way, having the employee have an opportunity to say, I don't understand it. Goes back to that, I know what's expected of me, 50% know and 50% don't. This is a great one-on-one time for you to be able to explain, to answer any questions about it, but also explain why it might have happened. Okay, this is why we had to make this change. And when people understand what's going on in the world and why their world changed, it eliminates some of those reasons for leaving. It eliminates that I'm in the dark. It eliminates that I don't like this and I don't understand it. Same type of idea with this third question. Hey, what could we add or eliminate? Just really trying to get a pulse, more pulses on what your employees are thinking and recent events. Businesses are dynamic. Things are changing all the time, and the more opportunities you have for this feedback. This is one mechanism. You could have other mechanisms in your business to get that feedback, but why not take advantage of this time one-on-one to get that feedback? So a word of caution about the feedback, though. And this is, whoops, this is too far. There we go. The employee feedback equation. So the idea behind this is something we all know. You could replace the word employee with spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend. I mean, this is a bonus. You're getting employee advice and relationship advice. If you ask for feedback and then you do something about it, you take action, that has a compounding effect. Someone took the time to ask for my feedback and then did something about it. Wow, that's impressive. On the flip side, if you ask for somebody's feedback and then don't do anything about it, that's a negative impact. You don't get any bonus points for asking and doing nothing. Again, this works for employees and spouses and boyfriends and girlfriends. So it's important. It's something we all know, but as you're going through this feedback and questions section, it's important to keep in mind that action. So right then and there, if this is something that the feedback you're getting is something you think you can do something about, let the person know. If you know for a fact you cannot change this and you will not take action, let the person know and explain why. Yeah, this is great. I hate I don't like the new way that, shifts are now 9 hours instead of 8 hours. Well, we can't change that. We're not going to do. Don't promise. Don't do what we do with our kids all the time. We'll see. We'll talk about it later. No, address it right then and there, so that you're working this employee feedback equation that says you're not going to let things linger and then somebody have, hey, I spoke about it and they didn't do anything about it. If you know you can't do anything about it, address it right then and there. And then there's not the expectation that you ignored their feedback. Last couple things here on this page, then we're going to pause. We're going to go into the best experiences and some more questions. Development and growth. What's really good about this part, and again, this is a proposed agenda, and with quarterly or more regular feedback sessions, you can prioritize topics. Hey, this one's going to be 50% of time on what's going on performance-wise and 50% on development. And this one's going to be, 50% feedback and development. This can be about compensation. You can play with this structure, but the idea of lead with the employee, share your thoughts, get feedback, you can play with the agenda items. But development and growth is a good one. Everybody wants to hear they have a place in the business. Everybody wants to hear that they have a future in the business. This is a great opportunity to get your read on your employee's current and potentially future level of engagement and be able to address any problems or concerns about that early on. And you'll have done the homework early on to be thinking through to guide this part of the discussion. Okay, how can you develop? How can you grow? You'll be providing them opportunities they might not have thought of. But what's really cool is when they come in with, geez, I'd love to be able to move up to this next level. I'd love to be able to doing these activities. There's a person in the organization that I'd love to be in their role a year from now, something like that. That's great. But what it does more so is this, you bringing up the topic of development and growth. It shows your employee that you see a tangible future aligned to their needs and desires, which is great. This is very motivating. It helps with retention. This is the time to take this implicit assumption. There's a place for you here in the future and turn it into an explicit and spoken fact. It's very motivational and helpful for retention when someone hears that they have a future. They have a place where they have potentially options, a place where they can make an impact. All right, so before we go to the after activities, let's stop a little bit here. Let's pull up the, so we're going to do two things here. We're going to see some of the best practices and keep on adding best practices. Again, we can learn from each other. And then we'll go to any questions. So let's start with any of the best practices. Let's see. We've got, whoops, that was larger than I thought it would be. Performance expectations and definitions of success. So I think that is a best practice out there of making sure that people are singing from the same song sheet, that people agree with what's expected. Again, this can be done during the hiring process and onboarding, but these check-ins are our opportunity to keep on making sure that those two, those definitions and those expectations aren't diverging. I love it. More money, more praise. The praise is excellent. The money is an important part. We're going to get to that, a little bit of the money right now, in a little bit here, and separating compensation from some of these other discussions, but absolutely. Yeah, that's excellent. To be motivated after reading your progress reviews. I think that's a great part. And it's something that, as an employee, it's great that you took the initiative to go through and kind of read your progress reviews, maybe even keep them in a folder and say, wow, look how I've grown. As the manager, that's, this can also be part of your before and part of your during activities, is kind of let people know where we've been, where we are, where we're going. So the idea of that prep work, having prior reviews here. I agree with this. I think the progress reviews, one of the things that I always enjoyed was when there was a goal or an adjustment or a, hey, can you put a little more effort in this area? And my manager said, hey, last time we talked, I mentioned this and look what you've done. It was great that, I kind of knew I had put in more effort, but for my manager to recognize it and see that, that progress was really helpful. So questions, do we have any more?
I don't see any, but I actually, something crossed my mind, Jeff. It's always easy to deliver good news, but when it's not so good news, it's a little bit more difficult. So what's your experience in terms of delivering that tough message when an employee isn't performing up to par, but still keeping them engaged in the business?
Yeah, that is always a tough discussion. There's a resource at the end of the deck here from the Society of Human Resource Management, how to have tough discussions. It's another area that I would certainly encourage people to reach out to their SCORE mentors, and we can certainly help with resources. But from my perspective, and having, unfortunately having to do that, couple things. One, direct and clear. Tackle it head on. This isn't something sometimes I think we were all taught something that years ago, that it's called like the what did I call it here, or I read it, it's like the feedback sandwich. I start off with something good, then I say something bad, and then I wrap up with, well, that's very misleading, because what ends up happening is your best performers, so should probably be hearing good news. You feel like you got to put some meat in the middle there that says, well, they get a mixed message. The people who actually need to hear performance message also get a mixed message, because you kind of put some niceties in there. So first and foremost would be, we need to sit down and talk about this. Second of all, I would say this is outside the context of, at times, of if there are immediate things that need to be taken care of, absolutely. If there's a longer term performance issue, or an area that was noted for improvement and hasn't improved, this is where the concrete examples come in. This is, we talked about this, I gave you these examples, I've not seen it, and here's how I'm measuring that I haven't seen it, or here's how I see that it was repeated. So the concrete examples, removing any subjectivity, providing real life examples, those would be the two ways. Handle it directly. I would also, the third thing I would say is, in a situation like that, completely dedicated time. I think it's important to maybe have one clear message, and if that only takes 15 minutes or 20 minutes, just have it be on that dedicated topic. I think those are some ideas.
That's great.
All right, so we got a couple more questions. Let me go through and just see the chat. Best practice technology, solution software. Yeah, there are more. I'm just not as deep in the actual technology solutions. That's going to help a lot with your before activity as an organization. Absolutely. It's going to help with your tracking. I think there's also something it's another piece of feedback here that we can get. But let me just, in the technology, the more you can use technology to facilitate this and make it easier, the better. Yes, the paper still works, but it also, it really helps you prepare. I'm going to come to the questions in a minute. There's one more piece of feedback before, particularly if you're revising based on any of these. There's one more question you can ask for employee feedback. And the question is, so how did today go? Particularly as maybe you're instituting a new way of doing reviews. Maybe there's a new technology solution that you want to get that feedback. Is the review process helpful? What could we be doing differently? You don't want those red numbers. You want the green numbers. You don't want people walking away saying, man, this new system is a pain, or I didn't understand what we were doing today. So really ask that question of, how did today go? I think it's great. It will be great to hear how you can continuously improve these performance reviews to make them motivation and retention tools. So let me we're good on time here. So let me just see. We got a couple ideas. Excellent. Thank you in the Q&A here of sharing. So ADP goes well with other ADP modules and talent management. Excellent. Clear company solution and ADP platform. Okay. Affordable. Excellent. Good suggestion. Thank you. Some good questions for potential hires to help them before interviews. Okay. Whoops. There we go. So yeah, interviewing is an art in and of itself. I think some of the questions you can be asking early on, certainly it's understanding what they're looking for in a job beyond just pay. hey, I like to do these type of activities. Yes, I'm looking, I think this is a place where you can be asking questions about growth. I mean, you can modify that, where do you see yourself in however many years type question. But the idea is, if you have somebody who says, well, I'm applying to this position, and I know the various levels within the organization, and at some point I'd like to be along there. I think that some of those early for potential hires. I think it also for potential hires, I think it's interesting. Maybe this isn't so much of beforehand, but during the meeting, I always think it's interesting to see how people have liked interacting with their managers, what the relationship has been, how they like to receive feedback. So that's a really, something that I think could be important. How do they like to receive feedback? How do they like to give feedback? This can be really helpful for potential hires of, right now we're talking about getting feedback within performance reviews. As I mentioned, though, you can have a whole other host of other tools for getting feedback. All right, so let's see, we answered live there. When a company's hiring their first employees or hiring virtual assistants who work part-time, for example, how might they structure performance reviews into a relationship? How often? Is it even appropriate at the stage of the business when people are still working solo or part-time? So this is where, okay, first employees or virtual assistants or who work part-time, certainly would encourage, regardless of level, tenure, work arrangement, having these type of conversations is important. So you might not call it a performance review. It might be a check-in. It might be a progress review. Take a look. I think that good framework is an example, but also later on in the deck here, we have a link out to various templates for reviews. And if you look at some of those, and obviously you can Google yourself also, you might find one that says, hey, look, this works pretty well for part-time people. It's not as detailed, but the idea of start with something that's at least quarterly, maybe it's even more often, to see what works. And then again, ask that question at the end, how did this work out? Well, this felt a little too detailed and and too much overbuilt because I'm just a part-time person, I'm a virtual assistant. And you can kind of learn your way into it. I know it's not a great answer, but at the same time, I think in these, you'll be able to gauge pretty well as, was this too much? Was this over-engineered for a part-time virtual assistant versus, look, I want to hit on 4 things: goals, opportunities, obstacles, and decisions. That's where something like that good framework might come in. Good question. All right, we have this is a good question. All right, now from Nabil here. All right, current high inflation. How do you deal with adjusting employee compensations? Do you do it during one-on-one reviews or announce an overall company policy? So I haven't gone a lot into compensation here. There's a page coming up about separating the compensation, but I will give an answer, and then certainly, we can have others chime in here. In terms of adjusting employee compensation, much like a lot of what we've talked about today, the gap between expectations is the challenge. In this specific example and what we're going through right now, I think it's important to address at an overall company level. This is feedback that no one's really giving you, or potentially could be giving you at this point. But this is on everybody's mind. That's always been a good way to kind of judge a one-on-one versus an overall company policy. Is this an unmet question that's in everyone's mind? And this goes for not only compensation, but other things. If you know there's a rumbling, if you know everyone's thinking about this, yet maybe not a lot of people have asked it, and it affects everyone, talking about it from an overall company policy. And this could be laying out the expectations or the process. We don't have an answer right now, but this is what we're going to do to get the answer. More information, more communication is important. But I really do think that litmus test of, is it on everyone's mind? Does this impact everybody, really dictates this one-on-one versus overall choice.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, this was a big topic last week when we talked about interviewing and hiring in today's environment. Obviously, it's real competitive. So you got to make sure that you are, compensating people appropriately so you're at market. But then also, hopefully, when people knock it out of the park and they're your key employees, you can't afford to lose them. So I guess, in my view, there are two levels. One, you already addressed, which is, are you compensating at a company level correctly? And two is, if you're having a review with someone and time after time, they're advancing your goal, they're critical to your company, how do you make sure that you protect them so they don't leave?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a great point and a great clarification, that there may be top performers, mission critical people that need to have that one-on-one conversation. So if you identify, so yeah, so to add on to the answer there, absolutely, there may be people that you do feel the need to have the one-on-one. You don't want to alienate anyone, but at the same time, you do want to make sure that your top performers you retain, particularly mission critical people. So at what point do we implement raises? It's really a business to business decision. What I will get to in a minute is separating performance reviews and check-ins, or designating, particularly if you're meeting more regularly in terms of quarterly or monthly, you can dedicate a conversation to implement raises. A lot of companies, it's kind of set. Okay, maybe we do this in January or July, or we do bonuses in here and there. But with a number of people here, you have that flexibility to decide when to implement raises. Now, you may have already put out a corporate policy that says this is when we adjust. It's already in your budget and financials. That's one very easy way to look at when raises happen. But when you have a little bit more flexibility, and you can do this on a one-on-one basis, I think it would be one potential option is have a review. If it's a very positive review and that person's doing a great job, I think a follow-up to say, hey, listen, we had a good conversation. I'm able to, in your business, you may be able to do raises at any time you choose, following up after with so we're going to move you up. Same thing with promotions. So it is an individual choice. I guess the biggest part also is then once you make that decision from a personnel standpoint, definitely go back into your financials and then say, when does this make sense? I think it's going to be important to say, when will this make the most sense? Have I budgeted for this? Am I moving it forward? How does this work with the rest of my financials, cash flow, etc.? So let me go. All right, let me do that one there. And let me go in here, and we got about a couple more minutes left. Oh, we got that one, I think. All right. Sandy Trainer, excellent point. Clear expectations about when talking about a challenge, lead with a plan. Absolutely. Exactly. The sandwich. I know it's lunchtime. I like sandwiches, but yes, this is the feedback sandwich is not the time to do this. You're absolutely right, Sandy. So, Jonas, I'm going to come back to this at the end here, so I will not forget that question. All right, but Sandy hit on something that I think is important. So you've done your before, you've done your after. The meeting is ended, you close the file, you're all done, right? Well, not so fast. There's a lot that you should be doing after the performance review. So follow-up communications. So thanking the employee for their time. They dedicated time potentially to their self-review, contributing to others with peer feedback, and the time they spent with you, the feedback they've given you. So make sure you thank you. Throughout the meeting, you probably identified some next steps, outlining those. This is also great because it helps you prepare for the next time. But most of all, the overall message you'll be delivering is, I heard you. We sat down together and I heard you. Now, when there's a challenge, when there's an improvement area, there are kind of two levels we have here for the next two bullets. Creating a joint action plan for noted improvement items. And the two key words here are joint and action. joint, this has to be done together. Now, you may be leading more of it, but you need that buy-in from the person that says, I get it, I understand why you're asking me to do this. And then the action, tangible actions, not just I need you to be better with customer service. Okay, so what are the actions that can do that? So this is when there's a very clearly noted improvement item, but maybe it's not that extreme. And as you've been going through the review, you heard some things that the employee has identified some areas where they might want to grow a little bit. It's not so extreme that it's an improvement area. It's more a growth area. Hey, I'd love to learn how to do more of this. This is where you can share resources to motivate and grow. Now, resources can come in many different forms. It could be, hey, this is a great article that I read that I think you should look at. It could be existing resources. Some of the training materials you have. Hey, I'd encourage you to go through this, take this module again, or maybe it's a different type of training. But resources can and should be other people. If there are people in your organization that are doing a great job in customer service, let the employee who's asking about this or wants to grow in this area, shadow them for a day. If someone says, I want to become the assistant manager, let them shadow the assistant manager for a day or longer. But this is how you can be acting, not only saying back to that that employee equation. I heard you and I'm taking in action. I heard that you want to develop in the company, and I'm going to let you see what it's like and the skills you need to have to get there. So really the idea of employee shadowing, sharing resources is important. Consolidating feedback is important. Sometimes you'll get it from some people and not other people, depending on the size of your teams. You can consolidate that and share that out. Sometimes reviews are all done kind of in the same month. So you might get 4 or 5 pieces of feedback, and then you can company-wide say, this is what I heard from all of you. Great feedback, here's what we're acting on. We'll also encourage people to know that in future reviews or check-ins, you're listening and you act on it. So you might even get more feedback in the future. And finally, we hit on that idea of public recognition, really sharing. It's great that you're sharing with someone in a one-on-one setting that they're doing well, but that idea of public recognition just leads to great results here. So I'm going to go through this because I know we're probably running a little bit short on time here, but great question throughout. Performance reviews. This is where, if you want to make these about motivation and retention, you cannot have compensation as the end goal, the last topic. It will dominate. Why is that? Because the employee is thinking one thing and one thing only. Show me the money. That's all they're thinking of in this whole conversation. You're not going to get great feedback. They're not going to give great feedback because they're waiting to hear the number. They're not going to tell you might micromanage. They don't like the new way shifts are done because they're going to be worried that that last topic today, compensation, is going to be a problem, and I don't want to do that. Also, when you're giving feedback, they're scorekeeping. They said a nice thing, I'm getting a raise. They said a bad thing, I'm not getting a raise. They said a really nice thing, I'm getting a great raise. They're not paying attention to what any of the context of what any of those were. They're just scorekeeping. So separating these, and if you're splitting this out instead of just an annual review into quarterly or monthly, again, you can designate topics, primary topics for each one of those quarterly reviews. They're really significant enough topics that they need to have their own dedicated conversations. And when you take compensation out of a conversation, money, status, promotion, you're going to get more, you're going to have more opportunities to understand what's going to motivate and retain employees. So there are a couple summary slides here. This is what we covered today, the before, during, and afters. The idea of elevating performance reviews from traditional annual to more frequent feedback, one-way dialogue monologue to a two-way conversation, not just top-down performance, but performance, growth, and feedback. From your end, focusing on more than just, okay, I have to do the review meeting. So what you can do beforehand to set yourself up for success during and after. And really just changing your mindset from a required task to the performance reviews being a tool to retain and motivate. So I know I rushed through a little bit at the end there. I know we're at 1 o'clock. Ramin, I think we might have a couple more questions in here.
Yes, I do.
Are there mental models we can share with the employee to help them focus on taking responsibility and ownership?
That's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good one. I think we're both kind of stumped on this one. I don't have a mental model. It's a great question.
I mean, I think this comes from setting the tone up front. We've talked a lot about making sure there are no surprises. So every employee, I think, needs to understand that they're being held accountable to getting results and doing their job and do it as well as possible. So, you know, it really, I would stay away from this aspect of it. It's a business and it's a job, and they have to perform. And that's how you measure them. Sort of that's, Jeff, how I think about it. You know, I tried not to try to get too much into someone's head, because you really don't know what's going on there.
Fair enough, fair enough. Let's see here. Let's go with a couple more here. If you have a big problem, employee should have an initiative manager in the room. First and foremost, safety. If you do not feel comfortable being in a room with one person, if you have news or that you think is going to cause them to have a very negative reaction, absolutely, safety first. Some of the before activities can help with that, you know, of you kind of trying to eliminate surprises, but you just never know. If you have any inkling that someone has the potential to be, that you want to have another person in the room, absolutely do it. Salary calculation. This one's a tricky one. I think transparency in any of this is important. You know, I think years ago, it was probably at certain levels, people would know that, and other levels they wouldn't. I think the transparency is important throughout, because right now employees have a lot of choice. And if you're not providing the transparency, somebody else might. I think it's important that people understand, and it also helps set expectations. In my own personal experience, this was more around bonus. I knew that about 3 or 4 levels above my actual contribution, the company had to hit its goals, and then my business unit had to hit its goals, and then my manager had, and then eventually what I did. But knowing that, and knowing that applied to everyone, was helpful. So I could see, yeah, I already know the company's not hitting their goals and bonus might not be there. I think transparency is very important, because employees have a lot of choice today. And if something's unknown or just not clear, they're going to go to a place that makes it very clear for them. Okay, whoops, one more in here. Is it good or bad to give some extrinsic incentives for reviews? How do we shift to more intrinsic value, being their experience, desire when it comes to the whole feedback process? All right, let's see here. So I think if I'm understanding the question correctly here, how do we shift to more intrinsic value, being their experience, desire when it comes to the whole feedback process? Yeah, this is another great question. I think it is a very it's a challenging question, because depending on the type of employees you have, focusing on intrinsic value versus, hey, these are incentives. We talked a little bit about some of this reward and recognition and public recognition, and how that can be more than just an actual dollars and cents type thing. I'll be honest, I think with some of this, there are people who go to work for the paycheck, and people who go to work for, yes, I want to do more. I see this as a more than a job. The first step would really be looking at your employee base and understanding, is it worth investing to really to really spend some time trying to find some of those ways to shift to intrinsic value versus extrinsic. So I think it has more to do with your workforce and will they react well to this. I don't know, Ramin, if you have anything more to add to that.
Yeah, Jeff, that's exactly right. I think you're going to have employees who are going to come in every morning excited to do more and figure out a better way to do things. And you'll have your core employees that are coming in, put in their time, doing a decent job and getting a paycheck. So I think the key is, as a manager, you have to read the employees and you have to adjust how you approach them. You know, the two types are completely different. And if you treat them the wrong way, they're not going to be happy. So given the environment we're in with having to preserve our employees, it's really critical to identify that up front. But Jeff, I think this is a great point, to pay attention to who your audience is in this case.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So we'll have time for one more question here, and then because I know we're already over. Thank you for hanging out with us here. Besides praises and praise, all right. What other incentives can a small business give? Yeah, I mean, there's when you're looking at large companies and what they can do. So we already talked about the praise, the public recognition. That is helpful. One potential idea that I've seen is smaller incentive rewards. So one of the ideas that worked really well, and it actually worked at a big, large company. I was amazed that salaried employees who had a bonus and a 401k and paid vacation time got so excited about this idea of a gift card tree. And so there was a gift card tree. It was, probably 20 little branches coming off it. They were $10 gift cards, and managers could recommend or suggest people who just gone a little bit above and beyond. I think that's one of them. I also think that during any company-wide meetings, I do think that praise is still important. I know in our own SCORE meetings, we have a member of the month. In some of my prior organizations, we had the opportunity, we had a whole page on employee recognition where usually any month it was somewhere between 8 and 10 people wanted to say, hey, I want to call out this person, shout them out for this contribution to a project. So there are smaller things you can do. You'll be amazed that the $10 gift card, it can make a difference. It's the recognition that's not the $10. Anytime I ever got the $10, I just went and gave it to my daughter, but that was cool. It was fun. It was nice to have another way and a more frequent way to be recognized. All right, so we are at the end here. I just want to make sure we didn't miss anything. We got that one. Let's see if there's more in the chat here. Oh, we got some thank yous.
Remote employees. I don't think we addressed that. How do you do reviews with the remote employees?
Oh, where's that one? There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're in a different time and place. Some people, I think remote is a lot of the same steps come into play, the befores, the durings, and the afters. The dedicating the time is going to be very important in the location. The location's determined for you at times. I think doing them remote is viable. We've learned ways over the past 2 years to do things we never thought we could do through a computer screen. All of us are learning how to do them. So remote definitely, but it's that same type of thing. Turn off the distractions, turn off Teams, turn off email, all that other stuff. So that's it. The other thing is this is where that last question in the review, how did it go today, is really important. Kind words, thank you. How can we tell if they want public? That is great question. People can get embarrassed. I don't want you to praise me out there. It's good enough that I sit one-on-one with you. That's a good during the review, it's a great thing to bring up and say, hey, listen, I've talked about some great things. One of the things that I like to do is I like to share the great work of the team with the whole organization. Are you okay if I do this? Sort of like an opt-in, let them opt in during the actual review process. Yes, you can share my private information to the public that says I did a great job here or not. Some other nice comments, excellent. All right, so I think, did we get that last one done? All right, so just a couple additional resources are in there. We mentioned a lot of these already. We went through questions, and then finally, just remember, we started at the top here. A lot of resources on the SCORE website. You can certainly become a volunteer. If you're not currently working with a mentor, reach out, find out more about the mentoring process. Workshops like this, meetups, webinars, and any of the podcasts, as well as there's some great resources. If you just go into the search box on the Minnesota SCORE and just type in employee reviews, challenging conversations, poor performance, you're going to get some good stuff that will link to articles, podcasts, webinars, etc. And so we really want to thank you. There's going to be a survey. Let us know how we can improve. Other topics that you're interested in. And if you're working with SCORE now and you're having a great time, definitely refer us to other people, and we always look for great volunteers. So we really thank you for the time and the extra time today. This will be posted Where, I mean, this will be sent out, yes?
It will be sent out to everyone that registered in the next day or two, and then it will also be available on the website if someone wants to watch it.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, again, we thank you for your time and your extra time. Great interaction today. I really appreciate that. That makes all the difference in the world. So I wish you a good rest of your Wednesday, and thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Thanks, Jeff.